Blog.
Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a problem. I would like to introduce
Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations team.
Welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. On the line with me today, I have the Archangel, also known as Brent, and Nick, also known as the infamous, fantastic Mothman Warrior 1.0.
Sure, why not?
Today's show is going to be about time travelers and weather modification. I know last time we did the show was one of our most popular shows in BFP radio history. So I guess this show was handpicked by Brent to do a repeat of, right, Brent?
Yep.
So
I thought it was interesting.
So before we start getting into the material, I was going to say I have a couple of news stories I was going to talk about. Do you have any, Nick, or just the ones I have?
Just the ones, yeah. We went through all my news stories last week.
All right. I'll start some of these. This one goes kind of along with the zombie thing we were talking about a few weeks ago. A 67-year-old woman who was presumed dead stunned family members when she woke up a few days later. Mama Victoria, how do you say this? Babatunde, as I think you say that, from Nigeria, would have been buried the very next day had nationwide strikes against the removal of fuel subsidies not prevented some members of her family from meeting up. How do you say this? They stopped her burial because her family had to go to some meeting about fuel subsidies. Contrary to our expectation, the nationwide strike lasted more than a week, thereby further delaying our journey to make the burial arrangements, said her son-in-law. We did not realize that God was already doing a miracle, but on the 5th day after her demise, my brother-in-law called to inform us that her body had begun to grow warm. In a dramatic turn of events, Mama sneezed and opened her eyes on the 9th day after her death. As the morning was busy taking care of her body, 3 days after the incident, that is, the 12th day after her being pronounced dead, she spoke to her younger brother and even drank some water and ate some food. So that's a little interesting. What do you think about that, Nick?
That sounds pretty interesting. I don't want to belittle Nigerian medicine very much, but the first thought that came to my mind was they probably don't have the best means of detecting death in that country, so she probably went into a short coma and now she has just come out of it. That's my thought. You know, even in the United States, we don't have the best way of seeing if somebody's dead sometimes. So in a place like Nigeria with inferior medical equipment and expertise would definitely probably not be able to detect death very well.
What do you think, Brent? You think like some people are saying in our chat room, you think that could be counted as a zombie, or do you think that's just, like Nick said, a medical disaster?
I think it could go either way. But
I would be pissed at my family members if I was almost buried alive and I barely saved myself like that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to strangle your Rolf or something if they were going to bury you alive?
Yeah.
Tests have begun on a new engine that could launch an airplane into space and revolutionize the way we travel, making it possible to reach anywhere on Earth in just 4 hours. The 270-foot Skylon spaceplane would take off and land from a conventional runway and fly 18 miles above the ground and out of Earth's atmosphere at 5 times the speed of sound. Critical tests are now being carried out to make sure that the Sabre engine, a hybrid engine that can operate like a normal jet engine and then switch to rocket mode, is faultless before its developers, Reaction Engines Limited, based in Colham, Oxfordshire, can unveil it at the Farnborough International Air Show, it says. So there's a new jet engine that's coming out that NASA and all of them are going to start trying to use. I'm assuming NASA will use it in the future. Until then, it's supposed to be able to bring civilians around Earth anywhere in 4 hours.
That'd be pretty cool.
So what do you think?
Hey,
Would you fly on that plane, or you think you wouldn't trust it?
I think I'd fly on it, and I was going to say, too bad you won't be able to get on that plane for your upcoming flight down here to help me move back to Vegas.
I thought you were going to say, too bad it'll cost like $1 million a person to ride on it at first.
Yeah, that too, yeah. It'll probably cost about $1 million a person. That's also a very relative fact.
Yeah. And Becky, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Hi.
We're just going over some news.
Yeah. I was trying to download Skype or reinstall Skype, but it was taking too long, so I had to call on the cell phone. But it's been a while since I've called in.
Yeah, it has been. We've actually had some people wondering where you went.
Well, I've sometimes on the radio shows I was busy out doing something else, or completely forgot about it, or computer was really, really slow there for a while, so I wasn't able to use Skype. And it started working better again, and I just tried to reinstall Skype, and that's what I'm trying to do right now, but it's taking its sweet time, so just going back to the cell phone.
Nick crying. Right, Nick?
Yep, exactly.
He was hysterical.
Yeah, it was crying hysterically.
So, it must have seemed like an aerial invasion to many eyewitnesses who gazed skyward in St. Petersburg on the nights of April 9th through April 11th. Reports of UFO activity didn't initially receive wide coverage outside of St. Petersburg, but have since trickled out. Most of the strange light formations were seen and videotaped by many people in and above Russia's second largest city, including one ball-shaped object seen hovering above St. Petersburg Pulkovo Airport. According to Russia's news site, Life News, airport employees were concerned that the UFO might cause a disruption during takeoff and landing of aircraft. A short time later, before any action could be taken, the UFO vanished. So, sounds like a problem for them.
Where was this at?
Over in Russia. St. Petersburg. Yeah, St. Petersburg.
When was this?
When was it?
Yeah.
That was last month.
Last month?
Middle of the month.
I don't think I saw anything about that.
Don't you usually follow up on some UFO news usually, Brent?
Yeah, every once in a while. But lately I've been busy, so I can't really get myself updated.
Mysterious green clouds have been spotted over Russia's capital, sparking fears of a chemical disaster and even some doomsday theories. But the emergencies ministry is advising the public to calm down. It says that clouds are actually composed of birch pollen, not chemicals from an allegedly burning factory in the Moscow region that some reported. Some believe that the authorities are hiding information from the public. Pollen is just an excuse. It might as well be the beginning of an apocalypse, one Russian blogger posted. The odd natural phenomenon mystically coincided on the 26th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster, ironically, which caused further speculation from the authorities withholding information. Biologists say birch trees started blooming yesterday, or last week, and I guess it would be now, which would also explain why people that live in the area were started sneezing. Birch pollen is a strong allergen, so people who are suffering from hay fever are strongly advised to take necessary steps. So I found this was a little interesting, counting on we were talking about the weather and stuff today. But
well, you also you mentioned doomsday. Did you guys hear about how some archaeologists just recently discovered like a new Mayan calendar that says that the world's not supposed to end in 2012?
Oh no.
Yeah, I saw that on Yahoo.
Yeah, I haven't read the full article about it. I saw someone post about it in my news feed on Facebook, and I talked about it in the news yesterday, but I haven't read a lot about it. But I mean, we still have the galactic alignment on December 21st, so who knows what's going to happen with that? But
yeah.
But yeah, it's just something I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say I never heard of that, so I'm not really
I'm not sure when they found it, but it's something that I've just been hearing about this week, so I'm assuming that it was just discovered within the last week or two or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to ask. So does that sound like a government cover-up to you guys, or do you think it just sounds like it could be birch pollen?
What kind of pollen?
Birch tree pollen.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of was confused about it. You said something that was about certain rain clouds, or?
Oh yeah, there's green clouds that were hovering over certain cities, and ironically, certain people were reporting that there was some chemical factory burning in the countryside, but Russia denied that the factory was even on fire, but people were taking pictures of it and stuff.
So people actually saw it on fire, and they took pictures of it, yet they said it wasn't on fire?
It was just birch tree pollen, that it wasn't the factory that was doing that.
That
well, if you look at Russia, if you look at the Russian government, times have really haven't changed their stripes very much since the days of the Soviet Union. No, they're not communist anymore, but the Russian government is still very tyrannical, and it is not beyond their character to cover something up like this. So I think it's a government cover-up, in my opinion.
Sounds like it could be.
Have that sounds like a Dale Gribble still. All right, well, we're going to get started with today. What's the first topic for today? I guess we'll just do time travel first. According to physicists, there's nothing out there preventing time travel. Create a wormhole large enough, step through it, and depending on the spin and direction on the other end, you might get spat out in the past or in the future. The big question is, then what? Every interaction in a timeline outside of our own is a breeding ground for paradoxes that violate casualty. Can't say that. Casualty. On the one hand, physicists allow us to travel through time. My little introduction.
Well, I could also,
how do you want to do this, Nick? I know you have some notes,
I was going to say, I got a couple little notes. I got a couple little notes of my own that can kind of piggyback off of what you just said. I guess I'll just say time is considered to be the fourth dimension, along with length, width, depth. I think of the three dimensions, and then time is the fourth. And to give a contradicting opinion, I found something something that he said that is relevant to what we're talking about today. Einstein said that the past, present, and the future all exist at the same time, so he said time travel is not possible. So a lot of modern-day physicists disagree with Einstein on that regard, but I just thought I'd offer that little tidbit of information to allow people to ponder on.
So I have a note here, speaking of the fourth dimension and all that. One researcher, I guess he says, by existing in the fifth dimension, people can observe us and remain invisible. Supposedly, it's what this guy says is his hypothesis that he was trying to get through. Kind of weird.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about dimensions, Brent or Nick?
Well, if you read Stephen Hawking's latest book, which I think was written a year or two ago, it sounds like utter nonsense to me. Apparently, according to Mr. Hawking, there's 11 or 12 dimensions. I think he says 11. There's 11 dimensions, and in the 11th dimension, there's this bubble. It's an energy bubble, he says, that universes just randomly pop out of as little universe bubbles, and they collide with each other. And I laugh when I think of a giant bubble where universes just pop out. But that's basically what Stephen Hawking said in his latest book. And then there's someone else that says there's 20 dimensions, and then some other people say there's an infinite number of dimensions. And I mean, modern physics is all over the place when it comes to this question. So,
you know how we solve that question, Nick?
How do I don't know. We might just have to ask Brent.
Brent, how many dimensions are there?
Brent. How many Brent? How many dimensions are there? You know the answer.
I don't know. Infinite.
Infinite. There's the answer, everybody.
We don't need Einstein at all. We just need Brent.
Brent knows what he's talking about.
But here's something interesting. I was going to say, Nick, if you don't mind, I was going to start saying a few little different notes that I've written down on here about different incidences.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, I wrote, footage from Charlie Chaplin's film, The Circus, has become the latest viral sensation to sweep the internet with more than 1.4 million views. The scene in question shows a woman or a man in a long black coat walking down the street and appearing to hold something up to their ear. If you look carefully, she's talking on a thin black device that is held up to her ear. If you notice also that their knuckles are bent they're bent in the flat shape of a cell phone. The phone is up to their ear. It's not an ear trumpet. It's not an AM/FM radio, obviously, because it's 1928. Clark said that the video technically, there's nothing to explain what's in their hand, and it's clear that she's talking or he's talking on their own, and they're talking into a device.
So I think I know what you're talking about.
Oh, you've seen that, Brent?
I think I've seen that. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Like, I mean, for the time, like, you know, it looks like a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you're like, well, wasn't cell phones not, you know, back then?
Yeah. So do you think that it is a person on the phone then? What do you think?
Yeah, from what it looks like, it just looks like someone's using a cell phone.
Have you seen it, Becky?
I remember when that article came out about it, and I think I did go look at it. I can't remember. I think I would have, but that was months ago, so I don't really remember what it looks like. I mean, for me to say, I don't know for sure if it was a cell phone, because I don't remember what it exactly looks like. Do you actually see the object in their hand, or was it just more like the way they were holding their hand up to their ear?
It could go either way, depending on the person, really.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember the actual picture and what it looked like, and if you could actually see the object in their hand. I believe it's entirely possible that someone could go back in time and they have their cell phone, but what if it's just something else and we're just assuming it's a cell phone? I don't know what else they'd be doing if they were. Right at the top of my head, I think of something they'd be holding up to their ear. But
just being curious. how did the person find that piece of footage if it's a person in the background that you don't see very long? Like, what were they doing scanning the movie like that?
Oh, so this was a movie. It wasn't a photo. It was actual
No,
footage,
it was a
video
movie,
footage.
But people took It was a movie, but people took still images of the time traveler thing on there.
I can't remember if I actually ever watched that or not. I should probably do that. Maybe it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it is on YouTube, actually.
Let's see if I can find it.
But yeah, Nick, on our Facebook, I would say you're going to have to answer this question. People are saying, do you think that it could be, or who would they be calling, and how would they have phone reception with the person's saying?
That is an interesting question. Well, if it's it might not be a cell phone at all. If it could be a different type of communication device, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
If the time traveler were to go into the past, they could have had a communication device which has not yet been invented in our present time that we are talking in right now. So it might not even be a cell phone. It could be an inter-time, I don't know what the word for that would be, but a communication device which would allow the time traveler to communicate with people from his own or her own time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. It might not even be a cell phone at all. It could be a communications device from the future which allows people to communicate through time and across time.
Okay, I just found YouTube. Time travel, a woman talking on a cell phone in a Charlie Chaplin movie. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Let me see. This thing's got to load. My computer's slow.
Let's see if anybody in the chat rooms. But, so Nick, here's another thing. You can't talk about time travel without mentioning the doppelganger, as we've seen in the past. So, Nick, do you think a doppelganger could be a time traveler? Could you explain what a doppelganger is for our audience in case they don't know?
Well, a doppelganger is someone who looks almost like a person but just has one or two qualities that make them slightly different. And a doppelganger could be a time traveler or someone from an alternate dimension. I believe if you read some of the gibberish that comes out of modern physics, the physicists talk about alternate dimensions and universes where, like say, we're talking right now on this radio show. There are other people talking on this same radio show, just in alternate universes, and things are just being slightly different in each universe. So I guess it's theoretically possible that someone, a doppelganger, could travel from one dimension to the next. It's theoretically possible in my mind.
A quick note to throw in there, remember, Nick, people say that they could be bad luck, too, as a lot of people think.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about doppelgangers being bad luck?
Yeah, from our past radio show, our callers and stuff were telling us stories about how people think that they're like bad luck and you're supposedly
they're supposed to be an omen. They're supposed to be an omen of death. Is what they're supposed to be. Because I've read stories like in Fate magazine about people who said who apparently saw the doppelganger, someone that looked just like them when they were doing, I don't know if they saw them doing something, then later whatever that person was doing, that they died doing that or something like that. It was supposed to be an omen of death when they saw themselves, their doppelganger.
Yeah, well, this one might freak Brent out a little bit, but I was at my school one day a couple of years ago, and I was at the art college, and I was looking at various paintings and pictures on the wall, and there was a picture of somebody dressed with a mafia hat on that looked 100% like you, Brent. Maybe I can go get it. I think I sent it back to you a couple of years ago, but it scared me because it looked 100% like you, Brent.
I think I remember
I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
it's like
Brent also had a look-alike in Palos at our high school too, though.
And Brent had several doppelgangers, I guess.
For $50,000, a buyer can own an 1860s era photograph of what an antique dealer believes is a very young John Travolta traveled back from time. The seller also points out the striking resemblance of the most obvious is in both men's eyes, in their hairline, it says. Most importantly, John's very unique trademark chin. And she says, I know you are saying John Travolta is alive today in 2011, and he doesn't look 151 years old, writes the Ontario-based seller, who's 100% positive feedback on eBay. But John Travolta is a Scientologist, and many Scientologists believe in a type of reincarnation. Of course, time travel can't be ruled out as well, is what the seller was saying. I guess they went on 60 Minutes or something while talking about it.
Actually, talking about that, I was going to say, I put a picture on Facebook of a 15th or 16th century painting that looks just like Sylvester Stallone. I think Becky saw it.
Yeah, it does look. It's funny because it really does look like him.
So Nick,
that's
question
a painting from the Middle Ages. Yeah.
The question that people are asking is, do you think that it could be possible, first, that he could be 151 years old, and second, do you think that maybe that could have been him reincarnated, or maybe it was a time travel? Is what I guess the question, since we're talking about time travel.
I guess it's entirely possible, but unlikely. The people in Hollywood are quite weird and they're quite secretive, so maybe they do have some time travel machine they're keeping a secret from us. I don't know. It's entirely possible, but like I said earlier, unlikely.
The celebrities are all the brain-eating aliens, like on the Hulu commercials.
Yeah.
Well, here's a good one. This goes along with what we were just talking about. An original 1870, this is carte de visite, or visite in French, showing a man who looks exactly like Nicolas Cage. We talked about this on a news story a while back. Personally, I believe it's him, and that he's some sort of walking undead vampire, the seller says, who quickens/reincarnates himself once every 75 years or so. 150 years from now, he might be a politician, leader of a cult, or a talk show host. It's an original photo of a man who lived in Bristol, Tennessee, sometime around the Civil War. I've had a lot of questions asking where I purchased this. I collect antique memorial photography, image of dead people from the 1800s. This photo was found in a very back of an album which contained an unusual number of Civil War-era death portraits. And she says all of the other people in the album, living and dead, were identified by name. This man was not.
And this is a guy that looks like Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, so if you were fighting in the Civil War, would you fight with Nicolas Cage?
Well, maybe, because he is the Ghost Rider. He's a Ghost Rider, so you might want to fight with him. That might be a useful person to have on your side.
Well, Nick, did you have something that you wanted to talk about, an article?
Yeah. We cannot talk about time travel without bringing up my former arch nemesis from our message boards, Eddie Penn.
Oh, yeah.
You remember his theory that he and I debated back and forth, I think, for a year or two about... According to this gentleman named Eddie Penn, it would be funny if Eddie Penn was in the chat room or on Facebook or something and tried to start the shoot up again. I would laugh. According to Eddie Penn, he said that all the angels and visions of people in the Bible were really time travelers. And he said that these time travelers went back to the prophets and to the apostles and all these people in the Bible and gave them these discs, which told them about what would happen in the future. That's basically what he said. And he gave me a website which had some pictures of some CDs and various other things. But unfortunately for Mr. Penn, when I tried to look up more information about what he was saying, the only source of information was him. In other words, he was the only person saying something like this on the entire Internet. And apparently our message board wasn't the only message board he was coming to say things about this on. He was going to, I think, hundreds of message boards. and putting this stuff on their message boards. And I guess some person said he was trying to peddle some book he had just written. But I just thought I'd bring that up rather quickly to include in the time travel discussion.
Well, that is interesting, though, because I remember that. I remember Brent was talking to the guy, too, but I don't know if he remembers. Remember that, Brent?
I vaguely remember it, but I do remember what he's talking about.
Like Nick's, it was his arch nemesis. Like yours was the NyQuil Nightmare incident, and this was Nick's NyQuil Nightmare.
Oh, okay.
Here's a good question coming from our Facebook. It says, could an image of a spirit from the past in a photo be considered a time traveler, is what you're saying?
Well, there are theories about ghosts that include that, the theory that ghosts may just be, I forget what they call it exactly, but like memory imprints, or rather imprints or residue from a previous era that just kind of spontaneously manifest themselves from time to time.
Well, that is what a residual haunt is, so. Residual ghosts.
That's one of the theories out there regarding ghosts. So, yeah, I guess you could consider it. I don't know if I'd consider it time travel, because you yourself are not traveling through time, but rather something from the past is coming to you. And they're not people that we know. Again, we really don't know definitively what they are, but I don't know if I'd consider a form of time travel per se.
Well, I was going to say, we'll get to our other topic in like about 10 minutes, but yeah, a quick note. We don't have to get deep into this because we have in the past, but some people say at the Philadelphia experiment where that Navy ship disappeared and reappeared with all that stuff, some people say that they think that was a time travel experiment gone wrong. Remember that, Nick?
Yeah, I remember us talking about that. I don't know,
but yeah,
I'm kind of sitting on the fence with whether
for 2 hours
or not.
Oh, yeah. Story.
Well, Jim, I don't know if you remember this time travel story, but I think you brought this up on our first episode of Time Travel. Do you remember the story of a RAF pilot who flew over an abandoned airfield and he got caught in this electric storm, and then when he flew out of the storm, it was sunny and there was planes on the runway.
You can tell the story to our audience, Nick. You can say it again.
Okay, well, I'll repeat what I said in a little bit more. Back in 1935, Sir Victor Goddard, a Royal Air Force pilot, flew over an abandoned airfield, and he encountered an electric storm. When he got swallowed up by the storm, he was transported to a time before 1935. And when he came out of the storm, he saw planes on the runway and people walking around and pilots wearing uniforms, which I think were 10 to 20 years old. Mm-hmm. So that is a rather famous account, at least on the internet, a rather famous account of time travel of Sir Victor Goddard as how he got swallowed up by this electric storm and then was shot into the past. And I guess, I don't know how he got back to the future. I haven't found that part, but it was an electric storm or a vortex or something that sent him into the past. And he knew he was in the past because the airstrip was in use and people were there wearing uniforms that were 10 to 20 years old. What do you think about that, Jared?
I think, well, I guess the only way I could say this is without saying another story. There was a story of someone that got lost in the Bermuda Triangle, and they report similar things going on there. So I was thinking, if it could happen to people going to the Bermuda Triangle on like a few dozen stories, I don't see why it couldn't happen to that guy. What do you think, Brent?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as you.
But, I know I got to bring up, it's sort of a story that some people say is a little silly, but I'm going to say it anyways. Nick, do you have a story about a 1932 German reporter?
No, I don't have that in my notes, actually.
Oh, well, this is you guys are in for a treat with this one. I thought this one was kind of funny. In 1932, German newspaper reporter Bernard Hutton and his colleague photographer Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T, were assigned to do a story for the Hamburg Altona shipyard. After being given a tour by the shipyard executive, the two newspapermen were leaving when they heard a drone of overhead aircraft. At first they thought it was a practice drill, but that notion was quickly distilled when bombs began exploding all around them and the roar of anti-aircraft gunfire filled the air. The sky quickly darkened and they were in the middle of a full-blown air raid. They quickly got in their car and drove away from the shipyard back towards Hamburg. As they left the area, however, the sky seemed to brighten, and again everything turned back to normal on a late, ordinary afternoon. And the photos Brandt had taken during the attack showed nothing unusual. I thought that was just a little funny, in a sense. I guess it's not entirely impossible. I thought it was a little funny, though. What do you think, Nick?
You said that they were in the middle of an air attack, but when the reporter took the picture, there was no signs of an air attack? Is that what you were saying?
Well, the claims are that while they were touring this airfield, that randomly airplanes started flying over and dropping bombs, and a battle started taking place. I guess the short way to say it.
Oh,
and then,
okay.
But here's the only thing: if these planes were dropping bombs and everything, would the craters still be in the ground, or would they disappear because the planes weren't in our time realm anyway?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's possible. It kind of, again, it sounds like a story I have. We'll get maybe to that in a minute, but it is entirely possible, I guess, for an event in the past to just pop up into the future, kind of like Becky said with residual hauntings, with people that lived in the house or whatever at a location in the past, they just pop up into the future as apparitions. Mm-hmm. It's definitely something that is possible, again, from the quantum physics standpoint, because when I learned this while I was doing some research for this show, Einstein said, or not Einstein, this guy named Richard Feynman, I think that's his name, he's a physicist that came after Einstein, Richard Feynman. He said that at every single moment, every single potential event that can happen in history happens all at once. So basically his view of time, and again, this is very difficult to try to finagle your mind around, at least it was for me. Basically you have a set of events of every event from the past to the future all flying around like a bunch of I don't know, like think of when you watch the lottery, if you see the ping pong balls bouncing around, this is probably the best illustration. So each ping pong ball is like an event, and they're just flying around and they can randomly pop up at any given time. So
hey Nick, someone in the chat room is saying he said that time wasn't linear is what they're saying.
Time isn't linear?
Yeah, that's what they're saying, it's not linear.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what Richard Feynman said. He said time is, everything happens at one present moment. Again, it's very hard to finagle your mind around, but in my opinion, it sounds like a bunch of nonsense. But like I said, the best illustration would be the ping pong balls bouncing around, and at any given point, an event occurs with each ping pong ball popping up into the little container that is used to draw the lottery winners. So that's how those residual hauntings and these other historical events just popping up out of nowhere occur. They're like those ping pong balls. They just pop into view.
Sorry to interrupt, Nick. I have a quick question. We have about 20 minutes left in the show. I was going to say, did you want to keep talking about time travel for the remainder of the show? And put weather modification for next week's show, or did you want to just try to talk about weather modification briefly for like 15 minutes or whatever?
Well, let's go on to weather mods. We've been beating...
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. We've been beating time travel over the head, so let's go on to weather modifications.
Well, here's my. We're going into weather modification for our second topic of today. And I wrote, weather modification is the act of intentionally manipulating or altering the weather. The most common form of weather modification is cloud seeding to increase rain or snow, usually for the purpose of increasing the local water supply. Weather modification can also have the goal of preventing damaging weather such as hail or hurricanes from occurring, or of provoking damaging weather against an enemy or provoking weather against an enemy or a rival as a tactic of military or economic warfare. Weather modification and warfare has been banned by the United Nations, but there's no way to really track if the people are still doing it or not. But Nick, did you want to take the first stab at this?
Sure. I'll just piggyback off of what you just said about warfare and weather modifications. Back in the days when we were fighting the Vietnam War, America was using, they were using, I think, silver iodine chemtrails to cause rain. They would go over the communist North Vietnamese, if I'm correct, the North Vietnamese enemy combat zones, and they would put these chemtrails into the clouds there, and it would cause massive rains, which would flood out the roads that the Vietnamese would use to transport supplies and troops, etc., which made it hard for them to fight.
Yeah.
So that's
so you're saying
the first example I found.
We used it on them, you mean, or they used it on themselves?
We used it on them. We flew over their areas, and we dropped chemtrails or the silver iodine into their clouds, which somehow makes a chemical reaction that produces a large amount of rain, which flooded out their camps and their roads.
And the person in the chat room was just agreeing with what you said. They said it extended the rain period.
Yeah, that's what I uncovered in my research today.
For chemtrails, because you were talking about chemtrails, and I don't know if everybody knows what that is, so I just sort of definition on here. Or the chemtrail conspiracy theory holds that some trails left by aircraft are actually chemical or biological agents deliberately sprayed at high altitudes for purposes undisclosed to the general public. It says, the theory is not accepted by the scientific community, which states that they're just normal contrails, and that there's no scientific evidence supporting them, supposedly, is what science says. But supporters of the chemtrail theory speculate that the purpose of the chemical release may be for solar radiation management, population control, weather control, or biological warfare / chemical warfare, and claim that these trails are causing respiratory illness and other health problems. That's a mouthful. You're a conspiracy guy, Brent. What do you think about chemtrails?
I don't know too much about them, but it sounds like definitely weather modifications or something. Because I don't know, it just seems like there's a lot going on there. I mean, like even out here, like I know at Edwards Air Force Base where I work, sometimes when there's like heavy rains coming through the valley, I don't know if the base is like centered inside the valley or whatever, like in the very center, but every time there's like rain by my area, it's just like pouring, but once you get on base, it's like it's nice and clear for some reason.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying you do believe in this, or you don't believe this?
Yeah, I do.
Hey, Becky, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am. I got really distracted. There's someone saying really weird stuff to me, so sorry about that.
I was going to say, what's your opinion on chemtrails?
Yeah, I don't know much about them. I kind of heard some of the stuff you said, but isn't it? It's what the airplanes leave behind, isn't it?
That's
what I thought it was. Oh, okay, yeah. So now something, the contrails. Now someone said something about those were like they were poisoning us. Someone said that at a meetup I went to. But as far as chemtrails, yeah, I don't really know anything about that. But
you're the all-knowing. No. I was going to say you're the all-knowing, but we know Giorgio's hair is the all-knowing.
But say what it was again, because I know you were talking about rain. What was it?
What did you want to know, Becky?
It has something to do with rain. Is that what you were saying?
Well,
I heard Brent talking about rain.
Chemtrail is supposedly a chemtrail is the government or whoever spraying chemicals in the air.
Okay.
And it's causing health problems or for a number of reasons why they do it. But then a contrail is just like a water vapor from an airplane up in the air.
Okay, yeah, this person was talking about chemtrails, and I'm just getting them confused. So people think that the government is spraying this stuff?
Well, yes, some people do.
Well,
I was going to say, I was on a weather modification awareness website, and these people were talking about how these days we hear the government saying that an ecological disaster is impending and that we need to cut down on carbon emissions and all these other various types of regulations and taxes that the government wants to enact. These people said that, well, of course the government would say that because they then go and create chaotic weather using weather modification techniques to prove their point. In other words, they're fabricating weather disasters to push the global warming agenda on top of the American people and of the world.
What do you think, Brent?
About
Yeah, Nick, you want to? Okay, I don't want to take over your article, but do you want to tell Brent what you were talking about, Nick?
Oh, I was just saying that this weather modification awareness website I went on today said that the government uses weather modification techniques to manufacture ecological disasters to push the global warming agenda.
Oh, okay, I see. I don't know. That's an interesting. I don't know. That would be crazy if they actually did that. I mean, just to get it to push it.
Yeah, it's like they
say,
I
have two or three little things talking about that, Nick, if you want me to mention.
Go ahead, build on that.
Well, somebody online, I think it might be that same website, they said they think Hurricane Katrina might have had something to do with chemtrails or cloud seeding, is what one person says. And then the other one says, the largest wildfire in Arizona history and fires in other states and related miscellaneous wildfires across the country, it says. The editor took note, according to reports of radio traffic, of 1 to 4 grass fires per day in certain areas, which started up with no explanation of or no cause. So, I mean, they're saying that this is a conspiracist, of course. They're looking for that type of thing, but I don't personally believe that, but I thought that was interesting to mention.
Yeah, I think we both read the same website, and I read that as well.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was saying, another website I went on talked about the HAARP facility in Alaska, the HAARP facility, which uses electromagnetic waves to heat air currents, which causes certain air currents to rise and to fall, which alternates weather patterns. That's one website I read. And then they said the HAARP facility also sends ELF pulses. I don't know what an ELF pulse is, but it's what they called it. An ELF pulse into the crust of the Earth, which causes the tectonic plates to vibrate, and that leads to earthquakes.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Nick, but someone in the chat room is asking you to talk about our last subject. They said no president in their right mind would want to make a natural disaster in their own country, is what they said.
Then he doesn't know politicians.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that wouldn't be smart. That would just make, I mean, when hell just breaks loose, that just makes them look bad. So I agree that would not be a smart thing to do, but...
Becky's going to get mad at me and make a storm come to Las Vegas.
Exactly. I was going to say, in the words of Ron Emanuel, who used to be, he's now the mayor of Chicago, I believe, but he was one of Obama's cabinet members at one point. He said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And that's what the government is doing. They cause these crises to occur, and then they jump in to act as the Messiah or the Savior to save the people from the crises, so then the people have no choice but to cling to the government and allow the government to get more control and more power.
I agree that they would do that, except for that, like the natural disasters that have been happening lately they're so bad, and people really aren't coming out looking like heroes lately. I mean, the presidents and everything, the government, they're not, I don't know, I wouldn't think anyone's looking at them as saviors right now.
Well, here's something interesting. In 1996, a chemtrail conspiracy theory began to circulate when the United States Air Force was accused of spraying the U.S. population with mysterious substances from aircraft generating unusual contrail patterns. The Air Force says that the accusations were a hoax, fueled in part by citation to a strategy paper drafted within the Air Force Air University. It's called Owning the Weather 2025. It's the Air Force's explanation for chemtrails and why they're not doing anything to the population, apparently, is what that is. I've never read it myself. I don't know if you guys are aware of that.
Are you talking about the Air Force's paper or some... I didn't get a chance to read it, but they released some type of a document which talks about how they are embarking on weather modification.
Yeah, it says that they're aware of it and they've experimented with it, but the specific incidences that people were talking about weren't them, supposedly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we read the same thing, yeah.
Well, here's another good question from our Facebook. If the government isn't doing the chemtrails, just saying, and it really is chemtrails, what's to say that UFOs can't come from wherever they come from and do it to our planet?
Oh yeah, they definitely could, and not also do the governments of the world. China also has weather modification programs as well as we do in many European countries. Private businesses or corporations also engage in weather modification. You can go Google it. And when I was doing my research, I was very startled to find that there are businesses which offer weather modification services.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
So it's not just governments, and it might not even be people from this planet, or not people, but beings from another planet might come down and modify our weather for whatever reason that we cannot figure out.
Well, someone's asking for an example of how changing the weather could be used in warfare, and I have a quick note. This wasn't I don't know how you call it, weather warfare. This wasn't really weather warfare. This is a good example. In the War of 1812, a tornado, I guess, ended up touching down during a battle, and it decimated the British Army. Aren't you familiar with this, Nick? I know Tim was going to talk about it, but he's not here today.
Oh. I think I heard it a while ago, but I don't really remember the specific details.
Yeah, I was just saying that would be a good example, for instance, if we use that nowadays, I guess. But the only thing is, wouldn't you not even need a military, really? You wouldn't really need soldiers if you could just make giant storms attack all these countrysides and everything?
Yeah. Well, no, you would still need a military, I think, because even if you attacked the enemy using a weather formation or a weather pattern, you'd still need somebody to come in and do the conquering. You know, the good old saying, divide and conquer. The weather patterns would do the dividing while you need the military to still come in and conquer.
But personally, I wouldn't want to be sent into a war zone with tornadoes and stuff going on.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
If you're drafted, if you're in the government or you are in the United States military, you face very harsh sanctions if you disobey orders.
Yeah. Well, we have about 4 minutes left in the show. I was going to say, Nick, is there another article you wanted to say real quick? Because I have some of you done.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, share one more. I think I used pretty much all my stuff.
There's good evidence that one world group and the Soviets have been jointly involved in weather modification over the northern hemisphere since the early 70s. In 1971, it was alleged that the U.S. and the Soviets started cooperating in secret weather modification projects. One such project was named POLEX, or Polar Experiment of the Global Atmospheric Research Program. And another in 1973 was called AJET, or this one's Arctic Ice Dynamics Joint Experiment. It is purported that these experiments involved attempts to melt away part of the polar ice cap. And other U.S. projects such as Nile Blue and Climate Dynamics involved the changing of the Arctic ice pack. There was even an article in the December 16, 1980 edition of the New York Times discussing a joint U.S.-Soviet project involving the transmission of ELF waves from Antarctica designed to interfere with the Earth's magnetic field. A mouthful. So basically they're saying us and the Soviets are trying to melt away some ice, or we're trying to keep the ice pack from melting in the Arctic, is the short version of it. I don't know why they would want to melt the ice pack personally, but... What do you think, Nick?
Well, I mean, it would cause... If you melt the ice caps, the sea levels would go up a lot, and that could cause destruction to the various other superpowers in the world, which Russia would have an interest in either weakening or eliminating altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one reason I could see them wanting to melt the ice caps.
What do you think, Brent?
I don't know. Don't really have a say on that one. That just it was too much. I couldn't keep up with all the stuff you were saying.
Well, I like Becky's comment.
That upsets me. You can't kill the polar bears.
We have about 2 minutes left in the show, and I was going to say, did you want to give a quick recap of today's show, Nick?
Yeah, sure. Today we began the show off with stories about time travel. We gave a short scientific background to it. Then we talked about various different possible, I don't want to call them sightings, but cases where time travel may have been involved. And then we went into weather modification and discussed possibly how the government may be using weather modification to push their own agenda and to get more power.
Yeah. Well, again, I would like to thank everybody that contributed to the show, which includes our callers, my panel, everybody that was in the chat room, and everyone that asked a question for today. And we're going to have a show next Sunday at 2 p.m., and it's going to be open line, because we had a few questions in the chat room, and Becky wanted to bring something up. So
the time slip thing?
Oh, what's that?
I said, you're talking about the time slip thing?
Yeah, we'll talk about it next Sunday on our other show. But
all right.
Again, I'll let my co-hosts say their goodbyes before we end the show for today.
Everybody have a good night.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everybody.
And thanks for listening, everybody. And again, tune in next Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific time for another edition of BFP Radio. Have a good one, everybody.